In this episode of the How to Write a Book podcast, we talk with Erykah Kimura, who is the host of the Take 30 podcast. And the reason I wanted to bring Erykah on the show was because her podcast is about mental health. And you all know I am a proponent of that, being that I had to face my own mental health issues. I know, probably still to this day, even as I journal, which is how we talk about the book journal inside the How to Write a Book podcast. And so I thought that she was an important host to bring on because sometimes we need additional resources, especially during NaNoWRIMO when we might feel like we're quote unquote behind. And so she gives us a little bit of a break, a little bit of a breather, and a new state of mind. How can we shift our perspective to something healthier so that we can enjoy this process and even possibly complete it? All right, here we go.
Welcome to the How to Write a Book podcast, the show that helps you plan, write, and publish your book, even if you're a beginner or just feel like one. Now, for your host, she's written over a dozen books and helps others bring their books to life. Here she is, Maciel.
Hey there, writers. Let's take a beat to talk about a special announcement. So November is your month of transformation. Get a 1-hour coaching session with me by choosing one of these 3 options, or all 3. Option 1, join our Patreon for $1, which will support the show. Option 2, book a $1 coaching session on coach.me. Option 3, leave an Apple Podcasts review. Send a screenshot to my email and get a coaching spot. You can do all 3 and get 3 hours of coaching with me. Find all the links in the show notes. Act fast. This offer is only valid for November to celebrate National Novel Writing Month. Thanks. All right. And welcome back to the How to Write a Book podcast. We are welcoming special guests today, host of the Take 30 podcast, Erykah Kimura. Awesome. Thank you so much, Erykah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. So I can't wait to dive into it.
Oh, yeah, me too. I'm really excited to talk about this. As we mentioned a little bit, the show is about books, writing your books, but a lot of it is about motivation, about inspiration. It's about holding on and believing in yourself when you're facing the blank page, if you feel like your story isn't quote unquote good enough. And that's why we wanted to have you on the show. Your show is all about mental health. So before I go into it, why don't you tell us about yourself and your show and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Erykah. If those of you guys haven't listened to the podcast, I do talk about mental health. So the reason I specifically started this podcast is to really start talking about it because mental health is such a taboo topic, right? And society doesn't talk about it enough. Our parents don't talk about it enough because they haven't had that conversation. So since the pandemic and everybody was struggling with, their mental health issues, I really wanted to share not only my story, but other people's story to help, inspire us to talk about it and really, have those deep conversations because I think it's so, so important.
Mm-hmm. It really is important. And I think it's crucial, really, because one of the things that I think happens with new writers or even people who've published is they can start to compare themselves to others. They can start to compare their work to previous work. They can start to compare where they, quote unquote, should be to where, the other, like where J.K. Rowling is, for example. And that's just like about writing. And that's not even including the people who are writing memoirs and, it's deep and dark topics, or people who are writing fiction, but they're trying to process things in their life through their fiction. There's so much there that has to do with our mental health that ties into our writing, I feel like, because if you are in a dark place, sometimes it's hard for you to write. And sometimes you need to address the dark place first before you go into writing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so like that's how like I started, the podcast is I shared my own struggles with social anxiety, which that I will say I had to record that episode, I want to say about 3-4 times before I put it out there because that's the most vulnerable side of me that I've never shared with anybody. And so I started seeking therapy last year because I was in a dark space myself. And to the point where I remember I started having suicidal thoughts. And that was a sign for me to really seek help before it got worse. And I started thinking those things, and then, I would potentially harm myself. So I really thought it was important for me to seek help. And I mean, at first when I was talking to my therapist, it was kind of hard to open up to that person, especially a stranger at first. But after a while, I started, after a few sessions, I started getting used to, talking to her and really, telling her like what has been going on, with me. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. I think I mentioned that on the show, but I went through therapy and it was so helpful. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
And that's because I went through a traumatic experience that led to an injury, and the injury was with me for a long time, right? And that took a toll mentally, right? I was in a dark place. You have self-harming thoughts, and you can't show up for your passion projects or, your creative outlets if you can't really just take care of yourself in that moment. But sometimes I was stuck in the loop of like, well, yeah, I might be in this dark place, but I have to be writing. I mean, like, if I'm not writing, I'm not a writer. And well, since I'm not writing, then I must suck at writing. And, and you're going to go in this circle. Right. But it took me going to therapy. It took me reflecting and journaling to start being like, wait a second, let me question these thoughts, let me ask where they're coming from.
Yeah. And honestly, I think just taking a few minutes and just writing your thoughts out, because I journal as well, like just writing, why am I having these thoughts, right? And really say, okay, so how can I start shifting my mindset? And I think that's one of the things that I love about journaling is like I can take a piece of paper and pencil and write it down, and I don't have to share it with anybody, but this is just my feelings. This is what I'm going through, and it really helps just journaling. And another thing that I do is like I try to write down like 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 amazing things that happened in this day. So like, it can be anything like as simple as like, I woke up out of my bed today, or I spent time in nature today, or, I read a book today. So it doesn't have to be like anything big, but like just those little things just to, keep me motivated too.
Yeah, I love that. Now I want to take a step back, and for me, I consider your podcast, it's like the art that we strive for as writers. That's what's being called to us, right? So at what point were you like, I'm going to start a podcast? And did you face any obstacles mentally that you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should, what was your journey like?
Yeah, so there was a lot of self-doubt when I first started, because I remember I listened to podcasts all the time, and I was like, I really want to start this podcast. However, I don't know where to start. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to record a few episodes. I'm not going to publish them yet, but I'm going to just record them and see where it takes me. And then if I feel comfortable, I would post it. However, I remember when I was going to release the episode in April and I actually did. But it was the help of my dad that really encouraged me to say, look, you know, you're never going to be fully ready for something. So you just have to just do it. You know, don't worry about what other people are going to think, because that's what my mindset was like. What are other people going to think? Are people going to judge the podcast? Are people going to listen? Are people going to like my page? Are people going to, you know, those kind of things? And I said, just, and my dad was basically saying, just do it. Just post the episode and get it over with. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to release the first episode. And I did. I released the first episode, I think April of last year. It was like around after my birthday. And that was really the encouragement for my dad to say, hey, you know, you're never going to be fully ready for something. Just do it anyway.
I love that. I love that. I love that you had like some support too, to face that. So, you publish your first episode, you start diving in. Did you start being faced with like imposter syndrome? Like, oh no, now I can see, you know, the more you do something, the more you see that like you have a lot to learn, you know?
Yeah. I did, you know, I started that questioning of like, should I do it, or should I continue doing this, or should I not continue doing this anymore? Like that was really out of my comfort zones. Like I was really trying to push myself out there, because like the problem with me too, like I really need to, you know, try new things and really get myself out of my own comfort zone, because like I'm the type of person that likes to be stuck there. But if I'm always stuck there, I'm never going to grow. So in order to get out of from this point of view, I had to, you know, take that leap of faith and say, okay, you know, this is what I want to do. I want to do this for myself. And I'm doing it for me. And will I get hate comments? Possibly. But at the same time, I have to say, you know, just try to ignore those hate comments, even though it's easier said than done. But push past it. Because you can't please, I've gotten to the point where you can't please everybody. And everybody, my podcast isn't for everyone, unfortunately. And so, you know, it is what it is. I just said, you know what, just go for it anyway.
Yeah. That's really empowering. How did you get to that point? Because I'm assuming, you faced those comments, you faced, you know, some hard pivots. And was this all journaling? Was this your therapy that you kind of got? Because it's hard to let go, you know? You're like, oh no, I got a bad review, or my editor said this, you know?
Right. Yeah, it was through a little bit of therapy, and it was also through reflection too. Like I had to reflect as well and say, okay, you know, this is something I want to do. I gotta do this for me, not for anybody else, you know? So that was my mindset going into podcasting.
Yeah. I like that you went into it with that mindset originally, because that kind of anchors you. And I think that can be, and that can be really applicable for any like art as well, you know, because you can go in, there's an unhealthy way to go in, right? Which is like, okay, I'm going to write my first book, and it's going to be, or it has to be, a major bestseller. If it doesn't make at least 6 figures, I'm a failure, you know?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, right, you're familiar with kind of like that thinking, right? How do people tackle that? You know, how do they disentangle themselves, which, you know, to still pursue your passion, but not really lean heavily on the unhealthy mindset, you know? What have you encountered? How do other people face that as well?
Well, that's a good question, in all honesty. I think, especially for me and maybe for a lot of people too, you know, we're always afraid of, you know, because maybe what other people's opinions and what they think of, like we tell them about what we're doing, and they may say, oh, you probably shouldn't do that because, you know, blah, 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 like, you know, and I think it's just really, taking that leap of faith, like I said, and really, push, really, sorry, I'm just trying to think as I'm talking,
Yeah.
but really taking that leap of faith anyway. And despite what people are saying, and I know like it's kind of easier said than done because like, words, hurt and they do get to you. But, it's really trying to, take that leap of faith anyway, because that person who may be telling you like, and for anybody listening to this who want to start a podcast or a business of their own, like, do it afraid because, life is too short, right? To be unhappy. And that is kind of my mindset. Like life is too short to be unhappy. So do it afraid and do it anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That brings me to a thought that I'd come across recently. Sometimes we get bogged down, right, by the negative and the what ifs.
Right.
Yeah. What if it flops? What if somebody hates it? And I've found that like you said, those emotions, they hurt. They do. And it sucks when something doesn't quite work out the way that you wanted it to. But, and maybe this is me personally, but the biggest pain is regret. It's not doing it.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
I agree. I 100% agree with you. Yeah. That's the biggest, pain is like you sit there and regret wishing that you had started doing what you're passionate about. And, so like and like I was saying before, you kind of have to, just kind of do it anyway, and really just try to push back on the negative comments. And that's easier said than done because we live in that what if mentality, because when I first started, especially the podcast, I was living in the what if mentality. What if this flops? What if this doesn't work out? What if what if nobody really cares and nobody listens to the podcast? But and one of the things that I think about, with especially new people going into entrepreneurship or starting to do what they're passionate about or starting to write that book is really just, do it anyway and really, just go ahead and take that leap of faith because, we don't want to live in regret and wishing that we should have started earlier or we should have done this, before, but, just do it anyway, because again, life is too short to be stuck, personally, life is just too short to be stuck. And, if you're feeling stuck and you feel like, you want to start, but you don't know where to, you do have lots of resources that can help you, like with, starting podcasts, with starting your own business. There's a lot out there because if you do a Google search, you find literally everything. And then starting a podcast, and from starting a podcast, entrepreneurship to writing a book, really just take the leap of faith and do it anyway.
Yeah. And I was going to ask this question later, but you brought it up now. Resources, resources are so helpful because sometimes you feel like you're alone until you find those resources. So what are some of your favorite resources, whether it's books, other podcasts, tools like the journal? What are your favorites?
Okay. So some of my favorites, especially when I'm dealing with like, going through a mental health crisis or I'm really struggling with my mental health, meditation. And I've talked about meditation in my previous episodes. Meditation is so important. Like even if you have to start meditating, maybe if it's just for 5 minutes, if you have 5 minutes, you just take 5 minutes. Personally, I like to meditate in the mornings, before I start my day, because then I'm more present, I'm, more relaxed, I'm focused. And so that's like where I like to start my meditations, like in the mornings, because I now meditate for about 10 minutes. So I started off like just doing a 5-minute meditation. You can even start by doing 2 minutes if you want to. The next thing that I like to do, I do like to listen to some of my favorite podcasts that I listen to. One of them being the Digital Diary podcast with Hannah Elise. If some of you guys have not heard of it, you definitely should check her podcast out. She talks mainly about post-grad life after college. She talks a lot about mental health as well. And she also has a YouTube channel that I followed, and I followed ever since I was in college. And I love like watching her vlogs, especially, her cleaning videos. I especially love watching cleaning videos in general.
That's cool.
Because like it gives me that motivation to clean my room, my bathroom, whatever it is. I know that may sound silly, but like that's what keeps me motivated.
Yeah.
So definitely watching my favorite podcast, my favorite YouTube, and definitely another thing I like to do is read books, so like I kind of like to read mystery fiction books. I'm a mystery fiction girl.
Cool.
I definitely, another thing I like to do is I always like to make sure that I spend time outside. Like that's so important. Like I try to go for my run. I even go on for walks sometimes depending on my mood, but, I like to go and spend time outside because it's really important for me to get outside, especially for my own mental health. And, another thing I like to do is yoga. Yoga helps a lot, especially when you do like different yoga exercises. So those tools I always like to bounce back on. And then another thing my therapist we were actually chatting about a few sessions ago when I was talking to her is like whenever you feel like any bouts of anxiety comes up, she was saying do like 3 things you see. I think 2 things you can hear outside, or your surroundings. That doesn't have to be outside. And 1 thing that you can smell.
Oh.
And that kind of brings you back into the present moment.
Love that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My therapist, she had mentioned that to me too. I remember that now. Mm-hmm. Something as simple as she would say, okay, run your hand on your jeans, just so that it can get back to the feeling. Where am I? I'm feeling the jeans right now. Okay. Because then anxiety would come in, just being there in the present moment. And then she'd be like, okay, now what do you smell? What do you see? What do you hear? Yeah. Have you read The Miracle Morning?
I have not, no.
Oh, that one's a good one. That one really touches a lot on what you do. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool that you have a very similar routine as The Miracle Morning. I can't remember the author's name right now, but he writes about how to set up your morning. Oh, by Hal Elrod, right? Hal Elrod. The Not So Obvious Secret, Guaranteed to Transform Your Life Before 8 a.m. That's the title of his book.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
It's really cool. I really liked it. It's flexible. So he pretty much says like there's a routine that you should do to set up your day, which includes some physical activity like yoga, some meditation for sure, some journaling, and I think there's 2 other items on there that he talks about that I can't remember at this moment, but to do this during your morning so that you can be refocused, kind of go back to yourself, going to nature. So it's really interesting to see the parallels between your mental health and, what he's also saying, like in the mental health aspect and setting yourself up for success. It's very cool. Yeah. You should check it out. I recommend it.
I'm definitely curious now. I'm going to definitely check it out.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's really cool. You know what? I was going to ask you, we're going to circle back. We're going to go back even further. Sorry. Turn it in circles. One of the things I wanted to ask you was actually more about your show as well for everyone to see as a resource. So Take 30, why is it called Take 30? How did you approach just even creating and organizing your show? Because your show has a lot of guest speakers, mental health experts, things like that. So the purpose. How did you go about just doing that? Why take 30?
Why take 30? Okay, so Take 30 kind of started, I usually was like, okay, how long do I listen to podcasts?
Mm-hmm.
And so I usually kind of listen to podcasts for about maybe 30 minutes out of my day. Sometimes I'll listen to an hour, but like I said, Take 30 just seemed like, that would be perfect, for the podcast itself, because like I can only listen to podcasts for about 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I figure too, maybe people who are, going to work or going to school who listen to it, maybe can only take about 30 minutes to, listen to podcasts, especially in the morning or their morning commute. So like that's kind of how Take 30 started. And then from there, I did a lot of solo episodes. So like solo episodes like me talking a little bit about social anxiety, talking a little bit about like ways to be confident. So I did those. Then I started moving for my second season, which I'm doing right now, to guests. So I have a lot of guest speakers on. And season 1, actually, I did have about 2 guest speakers. But for the majority of the time, it was just me talking. I was doing a lot of solo episodes. Now, like I now have a lot of guest speakers, especially for this season. So now we wanted to focus on like sharing other people's stories, because I've had other podcasters on my show. I've had mental health experts. I've had a lot of coaches on my show who I've had a climate anxiety coach that for people who deal with climate anxiety, and we dive deep into that. I've had, I just actually had a therapist come on the show, and, we were talking a lot about, and I don't want to spoil it because the episode hasn't been released yet. It will be releasing next week, but it's a really interesting conversation. But we talk a lot about, how America itself needs therapy. And that was a really interesting conversation. We really dive deep into that. But that episode is going to be released next week, and I actually cannot wait for anybody who's listening to this right now to listen to it. But I had a fitness coach come on the show as well. So we really talked about like the fitness myths of the fitness industry.
Oh. So
that's kind of how Take 30 evolved. So like now I'm in the second season, and then I'm planning to wrap my second season in December, probably about mid-December though, right before Christmas, because I still have a couple projects that I want to do before I end this show. So that's kind of how Take 30 evolved. So like it started off with me just talking to now me having guest speakers sharing their stories, and giving them the platform to, speak on their mental health struggles.
Yeah, that's awesome. You created that space,
Mm-hmm.
and to bring everything to light, like if someone's dealing with something specific, they can go to your show and be like, is this normal? If they have climate anxiety, like, is that something that is available? Does it exist? Yes, it does. And there's experts on that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What has been some things that you have learned that were surprising, since you started the show to where you are now, that you're like, I didn't know that,
Ooh. Well, one of the things that was surprising, especially starting, the show is, my goodness, that's actually a really good question. I'm trying to think.
I get really interrogative. I'm always like, so tell me about, where's your mind? Take me to the side door. What's going on?
What's going on? So like, I think the thing with starting, with being an entrepreneur and, also balancing this and working, is that you're always constantly learning. That's the one thing with entrepreneurship. You're always learning something new.
Yeah.
Every single day. Like you're always learning. You're always like, really, getting pointers from other people, learning what they do. And it's like one thing with entrepreneurship that I really think about. It's always a learning curve. You're learning something new every day. Yeah.
Yes, that is so true. And so, a lot of the authors, they want to be full-time writers. They want to sell their books, either self-publishing or traditional publishing. But the whole, for most of us, the goal is support yourself with your writing. So we are entrepreneurs in that sense. What resources do you already have on your show that talk specifically about the entrepreneurship struggles?
So recently that I had a guest on, and we were talking a lot about entrepreneurship, burnout, actually. And she was sharing how, because she was a teacher at one point, so she was transitioning from the whole from teaching to entrepreneurship, and that was like a big transition for her, because from being in the classroom to going full-time entrepreneurship, she didn't really know much about business. And so like that's like the resource, and she basically was talking a little bit about email marketing and how she had to, definitely, like, I think email marketing involves, like, I guess, emailing different things about different, talking a lot about your business. And so she was really trying to, get people to check out her business, check out some of her courses. So like we really dive into like transitioning from teaching from her full-time teaching job to full-time entrepreneurship as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's season 2, episode 33.
Yes.
Let's talk teacher burnout with Stacy Braga.
Yes.
Nice. That's awesome. From teaching to entrepreneurship. That'd be spot on. So anybody here in the audience, go to that, because that's a lot of what our audience says. They have full-time jobs elsewhere, from a variety of places, and they want to transition to writing. But writing, it's a very solitary activity, but the marketing of it, which is needed, isn't solitary,
Right. Yeah. The marketing part of it is really, it can be really hard. It really can.
Especially if you're like, you're a little more introverted,
Exactly.
And you're like, okay, well, I want to talk about my book. Then you're like, no, wait, I don't want to talk about my book. I want to go back. I want to go back to the corner. I want to write.
I want to write. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, this has been great. Actually, our time is nearly done. So this episode has gone by really quickly. But before we wrap out, I would love for people to know, where can they find you? Please share your socials. And then also what's next for you?
All right. So you guys can follow the podcast Instagram page. It's at the Take 30 Podcast. I am also on Facebook, the Take 30 Podcast. I'm on threads.net, the Take 30 Podcast as well. And also, I have merch. I have t-shirts out, and you guys can, when you follow the podcast Instagram page, you guys can click on the bio and go to my Printify page and order your t-shirts. So, you guys can find me on those social media those social media apps, because that's where I'm most on. So the next thing for me, personally, is that I actually do have a book coming out. Next year is when I'm planning to release it. I've written it up. I'm going to be self-publishing though.
Nice.
And, I'm hoping to get that out there. It's me and my dad, who kind of created this little short book that we're going to be writing. And it was really inspired by, I have 3 nephews. And I will tell you, they are those little rugrats. They're running around like they're chasing after each other like crazy until one of them hit their head.
Oh no.
So that was kind of where the inspiration came from, like, just going on like these little adventures. And so like I hope to release that, sometime in 2024.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we would love to have you back when you and your dad are ready to publish. And if you need help with editing or marketing, we do that at Black Hearted Story Studios too. So you have a resource here.
Yes, I'll definitely take a look.
Awesome. We cover everything publishing. So even if you have questions, just feel free to reach out. We could totally help.
Perfect. I will definitely reach out to you guys.
Awesome. Well, do you already have a title, by the way?
I do not. Yeah, I'm kind of playing with a few titles.
Working title. Okay.
Working title, yes.
Awesome. Well, we are going to be looking forward to that. We would love to have you and your dad back here whenever you guys want to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And again, that is Erykah Kimura with the Take 30 podcast. Erykah, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Us too. This was really good, really enlightening, and I hope also an excellent resource for everyone here in the show. We'll go ahead and wrap out this recording, and I'll chat with you in just a minute.
All right.
Thanks.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the How to Write a Book podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to keep up with me and my work, check out the website, blackheartedstudios.com. That's www.blackheartedstudios.com. And follow me on Instagram at Mastiel Writes. That's at MASSIEL Writes. As a book coach and publisher, I'm passionate about helping aspiring authors bring their stories to life. So if you've been dreaming of writing a book and don't know where to start, head to my website and let's chat. You get a free 30 minutes on me. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.